Hello, good evening, and welcome back. FBI bust militia plot to abduct Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. The FBI says it's thwarted a plot to abduct and overthrow Michigan's Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Of 14 people, 7 from the DA and 6 of the FBI. The charges are for counts of terrorism, either 20 years in prison or a $20,000 fine, so a 20-year felony, and also the possession of a firearm and the inclinations thereof, which is also a 20-year felony. So that is essentially what they're all facing from a federal level, as it is a felony after all. But the main point of this is, of course, what I was saying before happening in the UK, as I strongly expect it to happen, that if further restrictions are imposed, then you are going to get pushback from individuals. And the group in question here, the Wolverine Watchmen, don't seem to be of any political affiliation as much as they're more anarchist and anti-police, in fact, because it wasn't just hoping to target Gretchen Whitmer through this, but it was also to target police officers as well and trying to find them at their homes, as well as trying to take her out. And Adam Fox, the commander, the Boogaloo Bunyan, as he called himself on Facebook, was trying to recruit 200 people in order to storm the capital, if you will, in order to take her out as a hostage, in order to then try her before the November election. Their point is, as anarchical as they might be, to say, hey, we have a constitution, we have our protections, and actually you're going far too overboard with this, that the High Court has already found that you have broken the law and it is unconstitutional, so it's a High Court win for people like Trump, of course, and he's been celebrating that. And she's trying to say, hey, yeah, but there's a 21-day review, so I'm going to keep this in place for 21 days. So, well, that's not how it works, actually, that you've got to hold off for 21 days in order for us to see what the standing is on this and if it's constitutional or not, and if it's legal to enforce the policies as you're trying to do. And in that case, if she does go ahead with it for the 21 days, then that is definitely a breach of the law, further to what she has already done. And this does, of course, tie into trying to get her to release the death toll. That is that, just like other democratic areas, their way of apparently containing coronavirus was to quarantine the sick people in nursing homes. So, although obviously I'm not inciting violence and it doesn't encourage anybody to do that, that there is the thought that, well, there's self-defense, and she has actively, purposefully killed people, essentially, through going, okay, so we've got people who are positive for the coof, right, and they're not really at risk, they're not going to hurt anyone, they're not going to harm themselves, they're going to be fine, so there isn't really a problem, because the only people who would be at risk are the older people with other comorbidities as well that will probably die in a few years, that are being kept in places like nursing homes because they need extra attention. They're the only people that are really at risk. So how about we take these people who will be fine to just recover on their own and then put them in with the vulnerable people, so that the vulnerable people get infected and then they die. And in doing so, of course, loads of people have died, and I can't put a number on it because she hasn't released the figures. But if it's anything like in New York, then we could expect tens of thousands of people to have died because of her actions. And, of course, then, the hypocrisy in closing down services but using them, just like Nancy Pelosi had done, to get her hair done, and the closing of non-essential businesses and then using them anyway. It's that kind of thing that has got people really up in arms to say, you're being very totalitarian when what you're doing to us and you're not obeying the laws yourselves. So why would you expect us to do them? And so you're going to see more people like this. Of course, Michigan does have a history of their militia cause, the more recent movement from the 1990s. But they will take out, or try to take out, anybody who they deem as a threat to their own liberty. And so, yes, thankfully it was foiled by the FBI, and it seems to be that if it's a more right-wing plot, or at least not communism, then that does happen. This one seems to be more anarchical and anti-police, so saying that they're anarchistic might be a little bit misleading. But nonetheless, it doesn't seem as if they were really trying to rally behind Trump, or as right-wing as he may or may not be. But that didn't seem to be their intention. So the FBI were able to take him out. No qualms there. However, when you compare them to what's been happening in places like Portland, where you got 133 days of non-stop rioting and the FBI haven't done anything, and instead in Portland that you've got 50 cases from the rioting dropped and they decided they don't wish to charge them, then there is definitely a unequal law going on there. So am I supporting people who are encouraging violence? No. Do I understand where they're coming from? Yes. Would I advise that if they're going to take this route of 20-year felonies for the Wolverine Watchmen, should they do the same with Antifa as well? Most certainly yes. Trying to apply it evenly. If they're charging Wolverine Watchmen with terrorist charges, then they better bloody well do the same with Antifa, who have already caused over $2 billion worth of damages. That's just from insurance claims. So the actual cost would be significantly higher than that, as we all know how insurance works, and they don't like to give out any money. Otherwise, they'd be a failing business, of course. But that is the state of play at the moment. So this is the first one, but it won't be the last one. But then trying to say, as Whitmer has done, so well, Trump isn't saying that, he isn't denouncing white supremacists and the neo-Nazis, saying that they're good people, and just telling Proud Boys to stand back and stand by. That isn't denouncing them. Well, for a start, we've all seen the clips, the montages of him denouncing neo-Nazis, white supremacists, overtly, repeatedly. So, yes, he's definitely done that. When he was asked on the debate stage, did he handle it well? No. Did he agree that bad people? Yes. That's why I said, sure, he agreed twice, yes. And then latterly, because they said, can you tell them to stand down, or stand back, stand by, that's then what he said, because he was asked to say it. So yes, the Proud Boys themselves, obviously not white supremacists, led by the black Latino gentleman, essentially. So no, and then when the Proud Boys hashtag was trying to be co-opted by LGBT groups, then the Proud Boys organization said, well, yeah, we're for that as well. By all means, we've got gay Proud Boys. Yeah, sure. The more the merrier. Come on in. Because the LGBT communities didn't quite understand what the Proud Boys were about. But even more so, bear in mind that the anti-lockdown protesters were against Whitmer because they're claiming that she's too socialist and fascistic, but I repeat myself, as you see in the image here. So then trying to say, oh, these people trying to take me out are Nazis and they love National Socialism. Hang on, so the people who were suggesting that you are a National Socialist love National Socialism, then surely they like you and they're not trying to take you out. So, as provocative as this might be, and enacting Godwin's law is never a good thing, in this instance, maybe it's a viable tactic that you explain why your policies are actually very similar to the National Socialist policies that Adolf Hitler enacted in 1930s to 1940s Germany, in which case we think you're quite similar, and that is why we don't like you. So that then when they try and say, but you're a neo-Nazi, you say, well, no, I'm not, because if I was, I would like you, and I'm already comparing you to Hitler and Nazism for these reasons, because you share the same values, and I disagree with them. So maybe it's good to cut them off at the pass, because if they're using the same recycled talking points, then you've got to get rid of them immediately. Just like, of course, trying to label the Proud Boys as white supremacist while having a black Latino leader. So, well, that clearly isn't going to stick. And yes, when it comes to things like racism, it does suck that I'm almost suggesting you've got to play into their games anyway and say, oh, what, so you can't accept white people then because they don't allow it, and if you do, that you're going to be branded racist despite that. No. I know it's difficult, but I'm not suggesting that, otherwise you've already lost. What I am saying is that you put their claims against them straight away while upholding your own moral values anyway. So if you think they're going to go with racist, then hit them hard with that to begin with. And you could say, for example, with the presidential debates. So be saying, well, if Biden's trying to say, well, because of Trump, they've got fewer people around the family table because of COVID. I was like, well, yeah, but also Biden, I mean, there are fewer people around the family home because of yourself and Kamala Harris of arresting and indicting and charging and indicting non-violent offenders on trumped-up drug charges affecting predominantly black communities. So it seems like you're going after the black people and taking away their freedoms to then extend their prison sentences, as Kamala Harris did, just so that you can get more unpaid labour, essentially slave labour, as in you are trying to have black people as slaves, just like your family did before you, as her legacy is. Just hit them hard with that. And then when they say, oh, but you're racist for something, so, well, there isn't anything. It's not going to stick. So, no. So we're going to hit you hard first, because we're correct, and the facts will bear that out. And maybe that's the way to do it. So you're preemptive. So then you say, you're racist because of this. And then if that's going to be reported on, if they're going to rebut it, then say, oh yeah, but you're racist. It's like, well, I'm not, but again, here's why you are. And just use their own bad words against them. Because sure, the labels they use are bad, in which case you can still hoist them on their own petard, as Lawrence Fox tried to do with Sainsbury's recently. But I think it needs a bit more refining than that when it comes down to name calling afterwards. And in my opinion, he should just stick to his guns and say, no, racial segregation is a racist policy. So stop that. But as always, let me know what you guys think down below. Always intrigued to hear what you guys have to say. So glad my voice is back. And as always, until next time, have a good one.